Welcome again to Hope Dealing, and we are in the book of Exodus, chapter 3. We're closing out on this study that we're calling Exodus. Beautiful term for a beautiful event that ought to have impact in our lives even now. And I shared with you that Exodus is an example of God's deliverance or God's salvation, and that is also, I shared with you the expressions of God's devotion. And then lastly, we talked about the excellence of God's direction. He doesn't just want to get you out from Pharaoh, but to bring you up and to bring you to the land of promise. I want to talk about the land of promise. We usually say it's talking about heaven. The songs we sing, we used to sing anyway. I'm camping towards Canaan's land. Sounds like heaven. But I believe Canaan represented a place of performance, a place of representation, a place of glorifying God. And I don't mean glorifying God in just holding up your hand and saying thank you, but glorifying God as in pointing the lost toward Him. That's what Canaan was, the land of Canaan was supposed to be. Let me give you a clue just out of this passage. We'll talk about it another time. But he says, out of the hand of the Egyptians, verse 8, and to bring them up from that land to a good and large land, to a land flowing with milk and honey, to the place of the Canaanites and the Hittites and the Amorites and the Perizzites and the Hivites and the Jebusites. One thing, this land was surrounded by the enemies of God, surrounded by idol worshipers. That's not a foreshadow of heaven. It's a foreshadow of ministry. It's a foreshadow of a work that needs to be accomplished. Work. Also, this is a land overflowing with milk and honey. Now, that doesn't mean that you walk into the land and there's a faucet with milk and honey. No. How do you get milk? You get milk from cows and goats or whatever. And what do you have to do with cows and goats? You got to feed them. Feed them with what? Hay. That means you have to take care of the land, grow the land, work the land, because you can't have milk without putting some work into it. Honey means that there's flowers, means that there's bees, means that somebody has to go through the bees and get the honey. It's not a land of easy. It's not a land like we talk about with heaven. There's no work in heaven. There's no travail in heaven, but there's travail in the church. There's work in the church. There's work in our optimal performance of the people of God, surrounded by the enemies of God, and working the prosperity of what God gives us so that we can point people toward God. Now, whether or not you agree with this, we can all agree that we didn't come out of sin to just sit back and go to heaven. God brought us out of sin, brought us up from that sinfulness, and brought us to a place where we can operate as His representatives. We can operate in optimal performance that glorifies God through using our prosperity to point to how good our God is. Surrounded by the enemies. That means being a light for them to see who God is. So again, I think it's a challenge for us to see what God is doing with the salvation that He blesses us with. Not just to take us and go to heaven, but to leave us here to do the work, and then we'll go and rest. I hope this blesses you. Hope it challenges you. We'll see you next time on Hope Dealing. God bless you.